This video consists of footage taken from the channels The New Atlas with Brian Berletic, The Duran with Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou, and Connor Klein on the Tsar Experience. Please note, the International Outsider is in no way associated or in partnership with any of the channels quoted. The material being used is used in an informative way to raise awareness of the situation in Ukraine, and most especially the case involving the detention of the journalist Gonzalo Lira in the city of Kharkov. Gonzalo Lira, a journalist, a blogger and a YouTuber, was arrested in the city of Kharkov. Since the 5th of May, very little information has transpired about his incarceration or his state of health. What distinguishes Gonzalo from other commentators of the alternative media is not his sometimes provocative character or behavior, but the very location from where he criticizes the Ukrainian government. He was arrested in Kharkov, the second city of Ukraine, which is currently engaged in a hot war with Moscow. Gonzalo has been living on and off in the city of Kharkov since 2012, and on a more permanent basis since 2014. This made him an ideal observer of the tragic events now unfolding in this Eastern European country. His reports in the heart of the city of Kharkov since the start of the hostilities have earned him numerous supporters, but unfortunately also a legion of adversaries and enemies. In 2022, when he was arrested for the first time by the Ukrainian authorities, his detractors celebrated his disappearance and even went so far as to condone the attitude of the Ukrainian authorities and accusing Lira of engineering a stunt to attract attention. Others stipulated that the journalist had met with death in horrible circumstances. The following extracts are the reaction to the first incarceration of Lira and should be seen in context. However, it must be noted the narrators are also the presenters of a frantically pro-Ukrainian channel.
So, no, he wasn't beheaded by a group of Nazis in Ukraine, and yeah, there were just so many crazy conspiracy theories. I was pretty sure the next thing that these loopers would be claiming is that Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was probably drinking Gonzalo's blood in his matzo soup. Anyways, Gonzalo himself was propping up this, that he's an evil Nazi with his thugs, hunting down people on a daily basis, and yeah, living in Ukraine is basically like living in some sort of dystopia. Interesting question for Gonzalo would have been, well, why the hell did you choose to live there if it's so terrible? But anyways, one of the main the city of Kiev, it doesn't provide any evidence of that. But anyways, that's another story. So there are a lot of erratic things, just very odd things that he was saying. And then on top of it, he didn't seem to have evacuated his wife and kids out of Ukraine, which for a guy who's claimed to be Coach Red Pill, I mean, traditional generals, you should have first responsibility, wife and kids out into a safe place, because obviously Ukraine is not safe with the war. And that just struck me as very odd. And I don't really know why you wouldn't just take care of that first. It seems grossly irresponsible. Then he also didn't evacuate himself from the war. He decided to stay on. Again, pretty strange to stay in a country where you're basically parroting propaganda for the invading army, especially if the invading army hasn't taken over the country and achieved their objectives in the first few days. Then, do you really want to stay there and put yourself in obviously a lot of danger anyways because there's a war going on, but on top of it, be clearly openly on the side of the invading army? And by the way, it was possible to leave Kharkov, that's where he'd been living a bit, and then he basically calls for war crimes against the Azov battalion in Mariupol. Good riddance to them. They'll be strung up. It's content that he produces. And what effect is it supposed to have, other than maybe making some money from the advertising revenue or building up an audience that can be monetized, which some of the others do? I'm not really so sure how Gonzalo does it. Well, think about other laws. Occasionally when I glance at his channel, because I couldn't watch the guy after about a week of the war, because it was just so, I found it pretty revolting, his videos, but it's up to you if you want to watch them or not. And my big question was, how come the Ukrainians haven't detained him yet? I mean, they were able to kill all these Russian generals and locate them. How come they just can't pick up Gonzalo? It can't be that hard. And you know what else? I want held responsible, liar Lira, those who aided and abetted those people who blew up Gorky Park.
On the 5th of May, Gonzalo was arrested in Kharkov by the Ukrainian security forces. Subsequently, the Ukrainian authorities posted a video of Gonzalo while being detained and interrogated.
That should be no surprise. The article says Ukraine Security Service, SBU, has arrested Gonzalo Lira, a dual citizen of the United States and Chile, who has been living in Kharkov on charges of producing pro-Russian propaganda. So what exactly was the pro-Russian propaganda that he is accused of producing? And it's interesting because there's actually a YouTube video put out by the Kharkov Oblast prosecutor's office, and they show the evidence. So I'm going to play that whole video. I'm just going to show you real quick. This is their YouTube channel where they published this video, and it's about a 30-second, well, it is a 30-second clip. So let's watch that right now.
Vladimir Putin, he is, for all intents and purposes, what you would call an ethnic nationalist, but he's not an imperialist, the Kiev regime. I'm telling you right now. These people are neo-fascist, neo-Nazis. The West is the one puppeteering Zelensky, right? The Kiev regime also constantly shelling the regions of the Donbass. 16,000 people died after 2015 up until the start of this conflict. 1,000 children or 800 children were killed.
The video proves nothing less than Gonzalo is faithful to what he's always said in public. Gonzalo Lira was known for his controversial opinions, basically which are contrary to the mainstream media, especially on vaccination, gender issues, and other societal issues facing us all. People openly argue that Lira may have had too many of those opinions. Brian Beletic of the New Atlas summarizes how we should approach the whole issue.
If it was you, and I know other people out there are saying, I didn't like Gonzalo Lira, he said a lot of things that I didn't agree with. Well, do you agree with him that Nazis are bad and that they've infested Ukraine? And do you agree that Ukraine was shelling its civilian population and that that was wrong? On this issue, you can agree with him on. These other things that you don't like about him, whoever he supported politically, whatever things he said regarding race and religion and gender, that's not why they arrested him. They arrested him for speaking up about Nazis and shelling civilians. So on this issue, it should be very easy to find common ground, to speak up about this. It's Gonzalo Lira today that you might make some sort of excuse for not speaking up about. It could be someone else that you have much more respect and much more in common with, arrested and bundled off tomorrow. So just keep all of that in mind. And it could even be you eventually someday if you allow this type of injustice to go unchecked. In the video description below, I am going to put a list of accounts on Twitter that you can tag and put pressure on these people. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, the U.S. State Department, various figureheads at Human Rights Watch. Put pressure on these people. Humiliate them with their silence, their silent complicity. RT came out immediately at the top of the hour talking about Gonzalo Lira's arrest. The Western media is utterly silent, and silence in this case is complicity.
Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou have shared many forums with Gonzalo and have been very vocal since Lira was reported to have been put into detention.
Good day. Before I get into the information, the basic matters that I'm going to discuss in this video, I want to return again to the topic of my friend Gonzalo Lira, who remains under arrest in Ukraine on a nebulous charge, the nature of which I don't fully understand. I've talked about this at great length for some time in previous programs. You can go back and see what I've said. But in summary, I don't see that these charges, which apparently are going to be brought against him, have the slightest merit, and I don't even understand the nature of the case, given that he is not a Ukrainian citizen and that he has not taken any step that could conceivably undermine the war effort, in Ukraine's war effort, and given that he has no access to classified information and has never sought that information, it makes no sense to consider him any sort of spy or someone engaging in anything which could be considered espionage. So I've already made those points clear. I've already made clear my concerns about the fact of his arrest. But I want to touch on two matters today about his case. The first is that it is now some weeks since I've heard anything of him. I know about his arrest because the Ukrainian authorities have confirmed that he has indeed been arrested. As I said, they issued that statement which detailed the case against him, such as it is. But since then, there's been nothing. I don't know where he is, what kind of place of detention he's been kept in, whether his family have been contacted and have been informed about that, whether his family are in contact with him, or whether he has legal representation. And that is concerning. Generally speaking, when a person is arrested, one would expect information about them to be public and accessible, not kept secret in the way that seems to be the case with Gonzalo. That's the first thing to say. The second relates to a message I've had, a private message from a long-standing viewer who has suggested that it's possible that one of the purposes behind the arrest of Gonzalo is to try to exchange him for some of the American citizens who are held in Russia. Well, I have to say, if that is the case, it's both utterly wrong and completely illogical. If, as I believe, Gonzalo is an American citizen, then an American citizen held by Ukraine would be exchanged for American citizens held by Russia, if that is indeed the purpose of this operation. Now, that already shows the unethical nature of this transaction. If such it is, the United States would presumably be colluding in the exchange of one of its own people, handing out the handover of one of its own people in return for others of its people, which I have to say, I cannot imagine any government ever agreeing to do. But the other piece of illogic in this whole construct is that it is impossible for me to see why the Russians would agree to exchange him in that kind of way. He's not, after all, one of their citizens. He's not working for them. He's not done anything at all that, as I said, impacts on Ukraine's war effort. All he has done is that he's lived in Kharkiv and done what is his right, gone into the public space and expressed his opinions and his views. Why would the Russians be interested in him? I have to say, if this is the plan, it's both unethical and it is stupid. It is not going to achieve the purpose which it would presumably have. But that brings me now to the next point, which is, again, I've heard no word that the US government has been taking any steps at all, either to obtain consular access to Gonzalo or to arrange legal representation for him, or to keep his family informed about his condition and whereabouts, or any of these things. And I would reiterate again that if Gonzalo is an American citizen, as I believe, then that is the United States' obligation. And I would just say one further thing. I am not an American citizen, so I have there's very little I can do in this matter over and above what I'm doing at the moment, making these comments on this program. But I would say, if you are an American citizen and This is a lot to ask. People are busy. They often don't have much time on their hands. They've got many things to do. But if you can nonetheless find the time to write to your congressman and inform them about this situation, simply pointing out that Gonzalo appears to be an American citizen, he is being held in detention in Ukraine, try to find out what action, if any, the American authorities are taking on his behalf. Well, I, for one, would be very grateful, and so I think would be members of his family. I know it's a lot to ask. I apologize for asking for it. If I was an American citizen, I would be doing it myself, of course. I have no capacity to do that, but if you can do it, well, God bless you, and that's all I'm going to say. Now,
So this was a couple weeks ago, but I haven't seen an official statement on it. A U.S. citizen who was residing in Ukraine has been arrested, and that he was a California-born man. He was in the past like a Business Insider contributor, and he had a YouTube channel. He was an outspoken critic of Zelensky's regime. The Ukrainian SBU released a press release saying he was arrested for justifying Putin's invasion. So ultimately, it added up to speech. And I spoke with Congressman Ted Lieu, Democrat, and he said he urges the State Department to engage its authorities to, work out some sort of negotiation to get him released. So are you guys aware of this? How do we feel about our allies, detaining U.S. citizens for speech abroad?
I will say in general that we're aware of the report. We obviously support the exercise of freedom of speech anywhere in the world, and I'll leave it at that.
So you guys aren't working to get him released?
I'm going to leave my comments where I just left them. Okay.
This is my video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Monday morning. Let's talk about some news. And how about that exchange between the reporter and the U.S. State Department spokesman? How do we feel about our allies detaining U.S. citizens for free speech? How do we feel about our allies detaining U.S. citizens for free speech abroad? The State Department spokesman, I believe his name is Matthew Miller, I think is his name. He didn't have a comment. He could not comment to that question posed to him by that journalist. No comment. It's a pretty simple answer, actually. How do you feel as the United States of America? How do you feel about allies like Ukraine detaining U.S. citizens simply because they spoke out against the Zelensky regime, against your allies' government? How do you feel about that? The answer is actually very simple. We are going to get Gonzalo released. The United States of America believes in free speech, First Amendment, all of that stuff, and we're going to work our hardest to make sure that our ally, of which we pretty much control the entire government and fund the entire country, we're going to make sure that our ally releases this U.S. citizen. That's a pretty simple one to answer. I mean, you can tee that one up and hit it out of the park pretty easily there. But nope, the U.S. State Department spokesman, he didn't want to comment. Maybe, just maybe, the U.S. State Department, just maybe the U.S. State Department is actually perfectly comfortable with having Gonzalo not free and speaking out about the corrupt Zelensky regime. Maybe, just maybe, they're perfectly fine with Gonzalo being right where he is at the moment and not able to speak freely. Just a hunch. Anyway, good on that reporter for bringing this up. to the U.S. State Department. And remember what I said in a video a couple of days ago, that if you are a U.S. citizen, then you can get in touch with your state representative or your state senator, and they will have to contact the State Department and take this up with the State Department, because this is a U.S. citizen who is currently being detained for free speech. That is why he is being detained, because he spoke freely.
The whole issue of humanity's ability to speak freely and openly is under threat and is exposed for all to see with the arrest and detention of Gonzalo Lira. Journalism, truth, and facts are not, and never have been, or will be, a crime.